This is Paritosh. He's a seed stage founder who's raised 2.1 million for his AI company. The guy studied medicine at Cambridge, and then he went to McKinsey to do private equity deals. Like, who is this guy? I mean, yeah, I know his name is Paritosh, but like, what's his story? And that's what I'm gonna find out for you today. Hey man, Paritosh, you've been to SF recently, and I think you're thinking of moving there, so congrats on your O1 visa. Could you tell me a little bit more about Ascentra and a quick description of what you guys are doing and the problem you're trying to solve?
Sure. So at Ascentra, we're building AI for due diligence. Due diligence is work that private equity teams will do when they're buying a business. You'll have legal advisors, commercial advisors, tax advisors. We automate the work that the commercial advisors, which are typically consulting firms, would do. So I was at McKinsey before starting the company. There's tons and tons of analysis, copying, pasting, data crunching that they do, which can be built into products. And that's what we've been focused on for the last year.
And how did you come up with this idea?
Ascentra was born at 1 a.m. It'd been 3 or 4 back-to-back late nights, just doing the same repetitive work. And I just thought there has to be a better way of doing this. And so I started building a solution of my own.
What did the initial product look like?
It was a joke. It was a joke, especially now because the coding tools have come along so way. Like it was so simple, but at the time, you know, it was just GPT 3.5. You basically had to feed it API docs and it would write a Python script. You'd run it locally in Visual Code Studio. Every time there was a bug, I would copy it back into GPT and it would troubleshoot. The number of loops that I went in, I don't think anyone could count. Over a Maybank holiday, everything disappeared. It was my first time coding. You have to remember, I started out in medical school, then I went into consulting. I have no technical background. You know, this is everything I was learning on the job. My first experience coding, I was absolutely hooked.
And how much has the product changed from kind of this Maybank holiday that you're describing to where it is now?
Changed a lot. I mean, it's helped a lot now that we have an engineering team that sits behind it. Helps a lot that we now have customers that use it every day. But candidly, you know, it's so much better than it was when we first started about 1.5 years ago. And yet somehow it feels like the gap between where we want to be and where we are has never been wider. And obviously that's just because the expectations change as you start moving upfield, but it doesn't take away from the feeling of we're not moving fast enough, we're not doing enough, there's so much more we need to do.
And I know kind of, you know, we have a little bit of history. You know,
Not in that way.
You've experimented around with a few different product ideas. So the knowledge management system comes to mind. How did you decide to essentially drop that, or more generally speaking, which product direction to follow?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've stayed in the same broad idea space. Within that idea space, we've been running experiments. The survey analysis tool, which is what we launched with, has been the common thread throughout it all. In between, we've tried different things. Knowledge management was really interesting, and it was a great technical problem to try and solve. It applies to so many consulting firms, but the ability to do that problem better than the likes of GPT and Claude, especially now looking back a year on, we would never have survived.
Okay.
And I actually think there's so many companies that have been doing knowledge management for years that are just getting wiped. And so I'm glad in retrospect that we didn't spend that much time there, but I still think that it was a worthwhile experiment to do. And we continue today to run experiments to see if there's areas that we could be investing in that could, you know, 5 years from now be the big revenue driver of the business.
You mentioned a couple of different industries that your tool is solving problems for. So one could be private equity, the other could be consultants, for example. Are you selling to both these type of clients, or could you shine some light on who your customers actually are?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about a job as just a collection of tasks, those tasks can be done by people in different companies that are doing the same work because what they're trying to do is the same. And so it's very much the case for us. The products that we build do commercial due diligence work. They can be used by private equity teams that are doing it for themselves as part of a deal to diligence a business they're acquiring. It can be used by consulting firms who are trying to answer the same questions, but they're working on behalf of a client. And the same thing for corporates. You know, corporates also buy companies. And when you're buying companies, the questions tend to be similar. How big is the market? What does competition look like? And so the work that you do tends to be repeatable across customer type and projects.
It sounds like the type of companies that you're working with are like these large entities which have, you know, a lot of money, and I imagine as a virtue of that, either a very hierarchical or bureaucratic in nature. How do you navigate sales or kind of selling to these large companies?
Yeah, I mean, within private equity, the teams are very small for the most part. Within consulting, they tend to be bigger organizations. And so we work with companies that have thousands of employees, and navigating that is definitely difficult, especially starting out. I didn't really have a formal sales background. I was in consulting, went into this. I think that one of the things that's very helpful for me is that I acknowledged this is not something that I have domain expertise in. I'm going to get the best advisors I possibly can, people who've done 5+ years at DocuSign, people who are on some of the early go-to-market team for enterprise at Dropbox. And they've been really, really helpful for us as we've learned how to do things. There's been pivotal conversations that I've had that I've been 10 times better at as a result of having meetings with advisors that have been able to coach me on this is the kind of things that you need to do.
Could you share some of this advice?
Yeah, I mean, enterprise sales is very counterintuitive if you've never done it before, because everyone who goes into sales thinks it's about getting a close, right? In the enterprise, you're not going into a meeting and trying to close a deal that day. The best proxy is probably dating. When you go on a first date with someone, it's unbecoming to try and close on that. You're supposed to just build a relationship, work towards the next date, and you're both getting to know each other. And when you take it from that frame, it changes the questions that you ask, changes the kind of tone that you go in with, and it stops being about trying to get somewhere, and it becomes much more about learning about one another, understanding if it's a mutual fit. Because if you're working as a founder-led sales at a startup, you don't have much time. You need to prioritize towards accounts that actually have the problem, that actually want to buy and have the budget to be able to make a purchase. And identifying that is as important for you as it is, trying to convince anyone that they should use your product.
Would it be fair to say then that as you enter these conversations with people from, whatever enterprise you're trying to sell to, you both have this goal in mind of working together, but you're trying to flesh and get a feel out for each other in terms of where exactly such a product could be a good fit within the company or the team that you're having a call with?
I think the main frame that you need to take away is that rather than being, I've got half an hour to try and convince this person to buy something that I'm making, I've got half an hour to ask questions and learn as much as I can about this person, where they sit within the organization, how many people have this problem, have they spent money on this problem before? And once you go from being, okay, I need to tell them about all my cool features, to I just need to learn as much as possible, the whole flow of the conversation is different. I think that for a lot of founders who generally tend to have quite technical backgrounds, they've never done sales before, oftentimes they've been so focused on the engineering side of things when they've been growing up and when they're starting the business, they don't realize that they need a totally different approach when they're speaking with customers.
So here we've kind of jumped to already having a conversation with somebody from the team that you're potentially trying to sell to. How do you even go and get these first conversations in the first place?
I mean, depending on what you're doing, they're not necessarily easy to get. But I think that it's a good filter for, am I working in the right space? And is this a problem that people resonate with? And is my solution something people are interested in? Because if you're sending out 100 messages and no one is getting back to you, then either it's not a problem that people are willing to put time into solving, or your solution isn't working, or you as a person might not be the right problem to solve, right person to solve that problem.
This is kind of abstract, so I'm wondering if you can ground it in your own experiences and what you did personally in order to get these initial conversations and get to where you are. Getting kicked out. Got to find a different space to record.
It's cool, man. It's really cool.
That's great. Just getting into the flow and then off you go.
Sorry?
This is just so weird. I just walk in there and there's suddenly an atmosphere of silence. So your response was a bit in the abstract, talking about general sales advice. I'm wondering if you can shine a little bit of light on your personal story and how you managed to secure these initial and exploratory conversations with clients.
So for us, a big part of the early conversations was introductions through our network. I think that not always, but oftentimes you should sell in an industry where you have domain knowledge, where you have credibility, where you can bring real value beyond some surface level stuff. And for us, that was consulting. I'd worked in the industry for more than 7 years. I'd spent 4 or 5 years in private capital, which is the area of consulting specifically related to due diligence. And so we had a bunch of angel investors from our first round that were people from the industry, they were really important in getting us our first kind of conversations. I knew lots of people from my time there. And so it's much easier to get the first conversations. If you're looking at a space and you've been digging really hard and it's hard to get meetings at all, then something is not adding up. It's difficult to know which exactly part of it is. Like, is it because you're not the right person? Is it because you're not the right problem or the right solution? But the signal that you should be getting is, how much am I able to convert outbound into meetings, meetings into follow-ups, follow-ups into pilots, pilots into whatever your post-pilot.
Yeah, like having this whole funnel there.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on tools like Clay or Apollo or even lead gen agencies as a way of founders making sales in the early days?
I use Apollo a lot. Apollo is actually really helpful. It's a little bit clunky, but one of the things that I've been really impressed with is making leaps and bounds in terms of the UI, in terms of implementing AI. I don't think that AI really moves the needle that much, but they have definitely improved the UX. And so kudos to them because they're a big company. I don't use Clay that much, but probably because I don't need to prospect as much. I know the accounts that are going to be good customers for us. And so that's less important for my line of work. We've been experimenting with some AI SDRs and yet to find one that really has taken off, but I think they have got better.
And what about agencies? Would you ever pay somebody or an agency for a service to find you qualified leads?
No.
Why not?
You should be the one doing the outbound as much as possible. Up till now, we've never hired a full-time salesperson. We've had people come in and do bits and bobs, but it's all been founder-led sales.
That's a statement, not a reason. Why should you not pay somebody to do sales, or at least try to book these initial calls for you?
You need to get the feedback. You need to know, okay, what's the feeling of selling this product? Because that's the best way you know whether you're building something that's valuable.
I didn't mean that in terms of somebody making the sale for you. What I meant is paying for accounts and qualified accounts who are looking for solutions such as yourself coming towards you.
I don't think that happens in our space.
Okay.
I've never met any customer in what we're building that's been actively looking for a solution, because a lot of the time they're just doing the work. They're doing it in Excel, they're doing it in PowerPoint, but they see this as their job. And part of the reason why ours is a difficult industry to build a big company around is because if a business can't pay another business for 3 days, which is what Stripe were working on, they see that as a huge problem. Whereas if a private equity associate or a consultant associate is spending 3 days in Excel working on something, they see that as their day-to-day job. And so they're not really out in the market actively looking for solutions. You have to kind of put something in front of them and say, what do you think of this?
How much of this do you think goes to building a product and then selling it versus trying to preempt the customers and trying to get them to pay you before you even have a product?
Always pre-sell. Always pre-sell. We only start building things actively once there's clear, proven demand for it. The inception of the business was different because I was building something for a project that I was doing. And so I knew that there was at least one use case because I'd lived it, right? And so it was then about taking things and seeing who else had that problem. Whereas everything else, we've started the customer conversations first, especially now that we have active customers that we can pitch ideas to and say, what do you think of this? Is this something you actually care about? Would you pay me today? Really testing them. Is this something that you not just are interested in, something you'd be willing to commit dollars to on your next project?
This is, I guess, a contention point that a lot of new founders actually have, where they think, hey, we need to build a product and then show it to potential clients in order for them to understand what is possible as a result of using our product. How can you if you have an idea, how can you pre-sell that before you have built or touched a line of code?
You do it. You send 100 messages and see what you get back, or you send, maybe it's a smaller list of more qualified outreach, whatever that might be. But I don't think you need to have anything built to start having conversations. Even if you just say, this is a space that I'm interested in, then if there is interest, you'll get some meetings off the back of it.
And would customers pay you, as in some SaaS model or subscription, only to be delivered something 3 months later?
So in our case, I'd say that we have the first conversations to ideate, and then I like to come back to them as soon as possible to say, we had this conversation last week, I've built something around what you've suggested, let's discuss it. And that shows you, once you've verified that there is demand, it makes the customer feel so valued, because in a weekend, you have spent, it's very obvious that you've basically spent the whole time just trying to build something to show them. And so They have shown that they are committed, you've shown that you're committed, and it's just a great way to start a relationship. And that's one of the big things I've taken away from, there's a reason why it's not called sales. It's like go to market, because sales is, it has an aura about it, about trying to get something from someone. Mm-hmm. And that is not what good go-to-market people do. Good go-to-market people are experts in a space, and they advise people they work with. They might not advise them to use their solution. They might say, in your particular case, there's no need for a product like ours. If you're working with a smaller consulting firm that does lighter touch analysis, they don't need the kind of automation that we offer. Mm-hmm. And so being able to be upfront about that really helps build trust, and it helps you screen out people that are probably not the best customers. Mm-hmm.
You've mentioned during this conversation that the capabilities of what Claude and GPT can do in terms of building software has increased. How do you position yourself against this AI eats software mindset?
So in the space that we're in, there's a lot of work that previously was done in Excel, previously was done in PowerPoint. That space is changing very, very quickly. I think that AI for Excel, AI for PowerPoint, this already is and certainly will be the domain of the frontier models. Where you want to play as a software player is that you build applications that sit on top of all of these different sources of information. You build workflows very specific to what consultants want to do day to day, and you bring together enough of those that the platform that you offer is defensible even when the individual pieces of work underneath it are being done by the likes of Claude.
Is there a fear that as these frontier companies expand their capabilities on Excel or PowerPoint, for example, that somebody could just prompt them to do what it is that you're currently automating?
I think that you need to be able to do multiple things within the same work stream. And I think there is a reality that the Excel part of what we're building is not going to be a differentiator this time next year when our contracts come up for renewal. It's incumbent on us to stay abreast of what is going on with the frontier labs. We have a vision for the business where we take what we've done already and where we get our revenue, we build out into adjacent spaces. And so the collective work stream that you cover is not automatable in a prompt, etc., especially when you're interacting between multiple parties. There's a lot of money that's been invested in AI for Excel. I'm not sure what the future is for that beyond what you can do with Claude already.
And final question. How would you advise other companies who are either at the inception stage or have built a workflow automation tool? How should they be thinking about remaining defensible over the next year or 2 years?
The things that I consider are, number one, regulated industries. And it's not relevant for us, but I think that if you were to start from scratch, that would be something that you'd want. You want to be able to charge for an outcome, not for a seat. That's something that we do. We charge them a fixed amount on completion of the work. The work is not being done by people anymore, but you're still charging them. And no matter how many seats you have in the organization, if there's a dramatic change, then you're still able to charge per the outcome, and the outcome numbers should be increasing because you're doing more work. I think the other thing I would say is that increasingly you don't want to be selling software, you want to be providing a service, right? And so rather than being, we help you with Excel analysis, we provide the end-to-end coverage for all of your primary research. Some of that includes Excel analysis, some of that includes outreach to people who are going to be doing the primary research, some of that involves drafting up documents that you'll use to feed into it.
Cool, so you've obviously got your O1 planning to move out to SF. Congratulations on that. What do you think is the main difference with entrepreneurship and investment culture between Europe and SF?
I think people in Europe are being let down by the leadership here. Politicians, people who are senior in media, the people who make the decisions are letting down what is fundamentally a place that has extremely high talent density. There's no reason why the UK, with all the great universities here, should be home to some amazing companies, but they're not, and they're not because the politicians don't make enough. They're not ambitious enough. We're led by people who've never done real jobs. They don't even know what growth looks like themselves. How are they going to inspire the next generation to do great things? Europe is losing so many of its smart minds to America, and it will continue to do that whilst you have an ecosystem that is designed from the top to stifle people who take risks, who dream big, who do things that are outside of the norm.